Welcome to Open Wide for Soccer. My name is Suffer Tommy. Join me this evening. Pablo Maurer, Thomas Floyd. Guys, it's a Rooney extravaganza. Are you excited? Are you pumped? Are you ready?
Yeah, I don't know. Confused?
Are you confused?
Yeah.
Is this really worth it if it stifles the development of Bruno Miranda? That's really what I want to know. Like, at what cost is Wayne Rooney coming to DC United?
That's the question on everybody's mind, I guess, Thomas.
You really might be alienating the Bolivian fan base.
Right.
That's a genuine concern for some people, I think.
Yeah, I know.
Guys, as always, we're taking your calls tonight, but maybe just in the second half of the show. We're going to be joined here in a minute by Brian Strauss, Sports Illustrated, excuse me. We'll break this Rooney thing down for you and talk about some other stuff as well. But yeah, this is, I don't want to say unexpected, but surprising, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. I mean, obviously, we've known for some time that DC United has been desperately looking to make a splash before they move into Audi Field. There's been a lot of names linked, most of the attacking variety, as you would expect, because when you're signing a big name player and trying to draw fans to the new stadium, generally you want to go for guys that score goals. And also, this team needs players that can score goals. Right now, their options up top are not ideal, so they could use some help there.
Not ideal.
Not ideal. So, I mean, we've heard Tevez, we've heard Fernando Torres, Chicharito. I mean, who else?
Balotelli, lest we forget.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Sebastian Letou.
I think they could still get him, even though he just signed a one-day contract with the Union.
Would they have to acquire his rights from the Union?
Yeah. No, I think he's out of contract as of yesterday.
All right.
So in a way, it makes sense. Rooney is definitely a name, though. I mean, whatever you think about his on-field ability, I think we can agree that in the world of soccer right now, there are not many players that are more recognizable. Like the name Wayne Rooney means something. He
is known. He is known.
Yeah.
Right? And especially amongst, we'll just say, casual fans, right? I mean, people who just watch the World Cup or who, for some reason, by default, sort of pay attention to the English national team over the years, you know, being based in the U.S. I mean, he is, I would argue that he is more well-known to a lot of people in this country than, you know, somebody like Salah or Yaya Toure or any of these other, you know what I mean? Like, he is a known quantity in this
yes,
country.
I mean, he's been around for a long time, and he is the leading scorer all time for Manchester United and for England. And so when you're at that stature, you're someone that's going to bring in the more casual fans, and I think we have seen that in the last couple of days. The reaction from around DC, at least, is you can even see there are publications that are talking about DC United that wouldn't normally be talking about them. People on Twitter who don't normally talk about soccer are talking about soccer.
This is finally going to get DC United on, like, you know, Chad Dukes or whatever, you know.
Right.
Whatever the local horrible sports radio show is, you know.
So, yeah, I think before we dive more into, like, the on-field implications, the financials, I think we can at least establish a baseline that this is, of all the players that would actually be available, one of the biggest names that DC United could possibly sign.
I was wondering this. If you went up to a casual sports fan, the type of person who, you know, maybe watches the World Cup but then doesn't pay attention to soccer the rest of the time, but follows, you know, the NFL and MLB, and ask them to name, like, who are the most famous active soccer players, they would say Ronaldo and Messi. And then who else would they say before Rooney?
Neymar.
Neymar? I think
You
so,
think?
yeah.
Neymar,
think so,
Neymar
yeah.
borderline, just because he hasn't been around as long.
Mm-hmm. I think Neymar, even like Zlatan, I feel like
Yeah.
he's a little bit more as much of an outsized personality as he is. If you don't pay attention to soccer, I don't think he has the crossover impact that like
Maybe like
these
a
other players have had.
maybe like a Chad Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he's more I think known globally? You know,
Yeah, definitely top 10.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think Rooney's probably third or fourth.
Uh-huh.
I mean, guys like I'm trying to think of anyone else who would be in that conversation. Like the big names in the world of soccer right now, like say like Antoine Griezmann. Even he, his name doesn't have the same impact that Wayne Rooney's name has to the casual fan.
Yeah, it's true. It's an interesting thought experiment. Like, who else is up there? Like Paul Pogba, maybe. I mean, like, well known amongst sports fans, but I mean, outside of sports, even outside of soccer, I don't know. Maybe like Marcelo. Trying to think.
I mean, Iniesta.
Yeah, I mean Barcelona in general, right? Probably like
Luis Suarez.
because he
bit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, Luis Suarez is definitely one of the few players my wife knows because he bit someone.
Right.
that'll do it.
Yeah.
Zidane got a lot more famous after he had his
Yeah.
World Cup final meltdown.
Sebastian Lletget because he's dating Becky G. No.
Who's Becky G?
Apparently, some sort of music star.
Yeah.
She's
a
Thomas. Let's turn to our entertainment correspondent,
Yeah.
Thomas Floyd.
She is a musician. She, I believe, was featured on Pitbull's official song of the Copa America, which you guys obviously did not listen to, and she was in the new Power Rangers movie.
All right, as fascinating as this is, let's turn now to Brian Strauss, who's calling in. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you guys? Is it all three of you?
It is. We're all three here. Brian, I got to start off by asking you, have you seen the clip of Ben Olsen getting ambushed by TMZ at the airport yet?
I just now watched it.
Guys,
just now.
I'm gonna play.
It's fresh.
I'm gonna play this for all of our listeners right now because this is probably one of the most surreal things.
And for us, really, even though we've watched it 5 times, I really want to go for number 6.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Seth, you can turn it into your ringtone or something.
Oh my god.
Exactly. Let's see.
I just saw the headline, and it was this bizarre worlds collide. Are we in some sort of alternate reality feeling that came over me?
Thomas, speaking of alternate reality, did you get a new job?
I did.
You sound angry about that.
Thomas is like the entertainment editor at Washington Post Express.
When did this happen?
This happened. I started 3 weeks ago.
Holy shit!
I was
Can
waiting
we talk
for.
about this offline?
Sure,
you can talk about
I mean,
it. You can talk about it online. I mean,
I'm still kind of offended. I haven't received a fruit basket from you yet or anything, but
I think I should be due. I think I should be due some solidarity payments. Quite frankly.
yeah, exactly.
Oh man, that is true. Well, I'm returning to your old stomping grounds, right?
I know. Okay, yeah. Well, let's talk about. No one else cares, I imagine. I want to talk about this later.
Pablo, are we
didn't know.
having technical difficulties?
I can't get the TMZ website to load.
Oh, goodness.
that'll happen later in the show, I'm sure.
Okay. Well,
Brian, let me just get first your initial impressions of this. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about the Rooney move. Where are you generally as far as whether he's a good fit for DC United on and off the field?
I feel strange because I don't have like a really, really, really strong opinion, and I feel like you're supposed to. I feel like everyone else is either enraptured or enraged, and I'm just kind of, that's interesting. See what happens. I guess I that's how I kind of feel. I mean, they could use a number 9, right? So why the hell not?
Yeah, I sort of feel the same way, Brian, just because I think that you could really make a good case both ways that either this is a great signing or it's going to be a disaster. But there's a number of pros and cons to the point where I feel like I would just like to see it because it would be interesting, and let's see what happens.
Right, it would be interesting. Sports should be interesting, and everyone is so certain how it's going to turn out one way or the other, and I don't quite get that instinct because, like, if you were so certain about what's going to happen, then why do you watch sports?
Yeah,
That's
this is the entire point of sports is uncertainty, correct? I mean, like, you don't know whether Rooney's going to score 10 goals or I don't know, shred his ACL within 20 minutes of taking the field. But
the only thing I know for certain is that the Caps will lose to the Penguins in the playoffs.
I got some news for you, Brian.
That's the one certainty in life.
Yeah.
Well, Avi, Avi wrote a column today for us. I've been buried in World Cup and magazine stuff, and Avi wrote a good column today for us, and we were chatting a bit about it. And he said, "Look, I mean, think about Didier Drogba's sort of tenure with Montreal, right? And he came out like a comet, and he couldn't stop scoring goals. Everything that came his way down. But as the years kind of quickly caught up with him, and as defenses kind of figured him out, that production declined pretty fast. But they still got like a solid year and a half out of Drogba. And so let's say that happens. Let's say DC United gets a solid year and a half for DC United, and it gives something people to talk about when they're getting the new stadium. Okay, it's not my money. Like, that'll be interesting. If that happens, that's great.
I'm also glad you mentioned Drogba because just recent memory, Drogba, Ashley Cole, Zlatan, every one of these players, I feel like in our soccer Twitter bubble, arrived with a healthy amount of skepticism that they were washed up, that they wouldn't be effective in MLS. I remember, just like a month or so ago, people talking about like whether Zlatan would even be able to start for the Galaxy. Maybe he'd be a bench player, for them making an impact as a sub. And I feel like maybe there's a little bit of, I don't want to say overestimating MLS's quality, but maybe underestimating the class of these European stars and how much, their skill sets can still translate to playing at this level, even if they're past their primes.
Well, when you see how good Villa and Keane were, right? They both came over as 32, 33-year-old forwards, right? And they scored goals consistently for several seasons. I think, look, as a former striker, we don't run as much, right? So the travel, the heat, the physical nature of the league, and the lack of spending as you go further back the field, right? Most MLS teams aren't breaking the bank for defenders, so than you are as a midfielder, where we've seen Gerrard and Lampard and Pirlo and some of these guys really struggle. So if you're going to have Rooney play high and you're going to have him play up against the last defender and be a true poacher number 9, go for it.
And I also want to point to, obviously I'm kind of tipping off my opinion. I'm on board with this gamble for DC United, and I've seen a lot of people throwing out the idea of why don't they follow the Atlanta model and spend big on a young DP who they can develop, and maybe they don't have the name value, but they can contribute for a couple years and you can sell them and make a profit. I mean, they've done that with Lucho Acosta and Paul Arriola. These are players who, in the last year or so, they have spent big on acquiring some, by their standards, big money young players. So to bring in a star like Rooney who fits a different profile, I think works with the roster they have.
Brian, let me play this clip from TMZ just for my own joy. It's probably the 6th or 7th time I've watched it. Here we go.
Hey, what's up, Coach? How you doing, man?
TMZ. Oh my goodness.
Coach, how excited are you to get Rooney?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Signing. Wayne Rooney.
Certainly the deal is not done, but obviously there's some interest from our end.
All right. So what do you think about Alexi Lalas said that he was washed up? Do you think that's true?
Who's Alexi Lalas?
You know Alexi. Come on. I think you played with him, probably with the U.S. camp.
You know who Alexi Lalas is, Zach?
What do you think, man? You think he still has
You live
something?
in D.C., man?
Yeah, Falls Church.
I know you guys around here.
Yeah, man.
Got you guys everywhere, huh?
Yeah, we're everywhere, man. What do you think? You still got something in the tank?
And then Ben Olsen just kind of walks away. I think my favorite part of that clip is when he says, "Who's Alexi Lawless?" Then he turns to Zach Thornton as he walks in and goes, "Zach, do you know who Alexi Lawless is?"
And the cameraman didn't
what
get
are
it.
the odds? What are the odds of actually tracking down that TMZ bro? That would be fantastic.
Yeah, this is how small time soccer media in the U.S. is all of us are already talking about interviewing the TMZ guy.
No, I
interview
want to
Ben
know.
Olsen.
I want to know who that Falls Church bro who's
Completely.
getting some food pellets from TMZ to follow Ben Olsen at National Airport. Like,
Man.
We'll give
I
you
wanna know who that
$30. Get to DCA immediately. You know, like
My favorite part about that clip is Ben Olsen's general bemusement that someone from TMZ is interviewing him and is stalking him out at the airport. And I think he sort of speaks for all of us when he says, TMZ?
Yeah.
Like,
That's not supposed to happen in DC.
What?
You know?
TMZ
Wayne Rooney was trending nationally today for hours on Twitter, and I did 2 BBC hits today, and one of them I tried to pawn off on Goff, but he was about to get on a plane and had already talked to them. And then I tried to pawn it off on Tenorio, and he'd already done one. So
Once you remember the little guys over here, maybe pawn it off on Pablo Seth or Thomas. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if Thomas is qualified
next time
anymore.
BBC calls me, I will hand that baton off to you guys.
Yeah, actually, don't trust me, but maybe one of these guys.
Point being that it's working. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
is it's working. People are talking about this team that nobody but essentially like the 4 of us have talked about in 4 years.
Speaking of that,
it's already working.
Speaking of that, Brian, just to shift gears a little bit, I'm curious. I mean, you're a longtime observer of DC sports. There was some sort of discussion earlier this week. I think Dan Steinberg of the Post tweeted out an infographic about the sort of, it's talked about all the time. No major DC sports teams had basically won anything of note.
Had reached the conference semifinals.
Since
Right.
'98, I think it was. And obviously there's a completely sort of predictable backlash amongst MLS fans who say, hey, what about DC United or, this or the other thing. I'm curious sort of where you stand on this. I'm not going to ask you whether, MLS is a major sport in the U.S., but I mean, what's your take on that sort of, both the insecurity, I guess, of the American soccer fan and also the refusal, justified or not justified, of the media to sort of bring soccer into the fold?
My only experience working with local media was at the Post, and obviously the Post took soccer very seriously. I mean, both Goff and I had jobs there writing soccer for a long time, and before me, Will Kuntz. So it's weird to think of a local media outlet in this city who has been around for days when DC United filled RFK and years where they were the only champion in the city and had, parades and rallies at Freedom Plaza. I just don't get it. I don't get why they wouldn't be included. I mean, minor league sports teams don't build $400 million downtown stadiums. It's lazy to me and it's baffling, and I don't understand why local media would try to sell our own sports being short. Why exclude them? I mean, why exclude them in order to further the narrative that we're worse than we are? That's very frustrating to me. So I would, if I worked for one of these outlets, I would absolutely agitate for DC to be included. It's too bad. I mean, there are other caveats, right? The Nationals haven't even been in the city for 20 years. Dan Snyder owns the Redskins. He should, why not exclude him?
They're a Maryland team anyways, right? So.
That's true, but he's got no shot. But he's got no chance of ever owning a winner. So exclude him. It does bother me a little bit. And like Pablo, you and I were talking. I mean, lots of smaller DC teams have won various honors and trophies over the years. Instead of ignoring them and sort of lampooning them, celebrate them a little bit. I'm not saying you got to shut down Pennsylvania Avenue and have a friggin' parade.
Yeah, it was
let's not act like we're a town of losers.
Some absurd number, right? You told me it was 20 or 30 some odd titles amongst, I guess, quote unquote minor, secondary teams.
Yeah,
I guess.
Soccer,
in DC.
women's soccer, the the pro team tennis, the minor league baseball, pro lacrosse. And again, I'm not saying pro lacrosse is the Super Bowl, but it's not like no teams. Obviously, you've got Maryland, Georgetown, George Mason. I mean, it's not like this city is completely starved for winners. It's starved for winners if you cherry pick the stats that suit your narrative. So I'm not saying we should include the team tennis along with the Capitals and Nationals playoff gag jobs, but it's just a point making that these are arbitrary designations. And no, we're not City of Champions. But and I go on Twitter half my tweets now are like Capitals fatalism. But DC United should be included. DC United is a in the highest soccer league in this country. Their attendances have over the years rivaled those of the Wizards and the Caps, and they should be included.
Great. Here comes the angry tweets from the Washington Castles fans.
Yeah.
All right, I will say this. I went to a Castles, what do you call it? Whatever.
Match.
Event,
a Castles, whatever you call it. Yeah.
It is the worst sports fan experience I've had in my life. It was so bad.
What was so bad about it?
So bad that I thought of writing, like for a minute I forgot who I was, and I thought about writing a letter. It's like when I worked at the Post, I used to have arguments with my dad about writing letters to the Post complaining about their grammar. I'm like, you can't do this anymore. I work there now. What'd you say? What was bad about the Castles?
No, what was so bad about the Washington Castles experience?
Okay, two things. The first is that there was a hype man with a microphone who was constant. After every single point, let me hear some noise, get on your, there wasn't even a chance to let any organic atmosphere develop because this asshole would not shut up. And I can't convey the constant, relentless nature of this idiot every 10 seconds getting on their microphone screaming for more noise. It was at GW. And then the second worst thing about it, so listening to this idiot I had to leave. I couldn't take it anymore. The second thing about it was that at some point, I guess they play sets, right? They play first to 6 game sets, and then they rotate players in and out. It's mixed doubles, it's men's, women's, whatever. And at some point, after the third or fourth set, they just all left the court, and nobody did anything for half an hour. And they never came on and explained why there was this. It was legit 25, 30 minutes of just dark.
They were probably just we can't stand this fucking hype man. Let's get the hell out of here.
Everyone there seemed to know what was going on except for me. Like it was just this inexplicable 30-minute intermission for no reason, and they never announced. They never said, "Hey, everybody, we're going to be back in 30 minutes. We got a Zamboni to tennis court." Nothing. And it was just excruciating, and you could not pay me to go back. That being said, the Washington Capitals are 6-time Billie Jean King team tennis champions, and
we'll take it.
Jesus Christ,
we'll take it.
Yeah. Strauss, we're going to let you go, man. We always appreciate you coming on. Didn't think I would listen to you rant about the Washington Castles for 6 minutes this time, but it added some flavor to the show. So
good. I always vie to be disappointing. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care. Boy, I say this as somebody who is like a master in the art of self-deprecation. Brian Strauss is like a
wizard level.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Guys, in just a minute here, we're going to have Calvin May on, Everton fan, writer. He's going to give us maybe a little bit of insight, because I'm not going to lie, I haven't watched once. Have you guys watched one single Everton game this year?
I watched 4 or 5, and not by watched I mean was on in the background while I worked.
I try to avoid it if I can.
Right.
They've been pretty mediocre this season.
They had some Europa League games I remember being forced to half pay attention to.
Yeah, the thing about the Premier League this year is that most teams were not fun to watch. I mean, there were only 3 or 4 teams that when they're on, you're like, okay, I want to see this. But the mid-table teams were garbage this year.
When you have a league with no playoffs, there's just no motivation for the mid-table teams to really put together a quality product.
Yeah, so
is that what it is?
I'm glad we have Calvin coming on. So somebody who's watched Wayne Rooney more recently than 3 years ago can give us an opinion on whether he's still good.
Guys, I'm excited to have Wayne Rooney's Twitter account in the United States, frankly. Earlier I was sort of sifting through for some of the classics. I found a couple here. For example, when he got his quasi-notorious, was it hair plugs? Hair transplant?
Hair transplant, I
At
believe.
Wayne Rooney 5:10 a.m., the 4th of June, 2011. Just to confirm to all my followers, I have had a hair transplant. I was going bald at 25, why not? I'm delighted with the result.
We all are, and followed it up very quickly with...
At Wayne Rooney 5:25 a.m., the 4th of June, 2011. It's still a bit bruised and swollen. When it dies down, you will be first to see it. Anyone recommend any good hair gel? Ha 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 ha.
I'm a fan of what I'm hoping he's gonna sort of stagger out of a Capitol Hill bar, and some intern's gonna be like, you're washed up, Rooney, and he's gonna be like,
At Wayne Rooney 7:24 p.m., the 17th of May, 2011. I'll put you asleep within 10 seconds, you little girl. Don't say stuff and not follow up on it. I'll be waiting.
beautiful. It's
I
beautiful.
could really see him saying that to that
didn't-
TMZ cameraman.
I didn't feed this one into the voice thing, but there's one that just says, Mr. Bean, period. Funny, period. And there's another one of his tweets where he just goes, it's just the word mate 7 times. Mate, 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 mate.
Oh, I would really like to hear the British robot say that.
You can imagine,
You little girl.
God. I can't wait to gather Rooney's thoughts on the training facilities at RFK Stadium, I wonder if they've told him that he's going to be using those still.
He's going to be hopping in a rusty old van that transports him from a crumbling stadium to a bug-infested training field, with
Wayne,
dragonflies.
Remember that World
everywhere.
Cup commercial in 2010 where he staggered out of a trailer eating cereal with a beard?
I remember it because I saw someone tweet that image.
Yeah, that's like a strong that image has strong RFK vibes.
I wonder when these big name players come over from Europe, when these deals kind of come together quickly, how much they really. I'll continue this thought later.
No, continue, please. All right, don't. All right, joining us now, I got Calvin May. Calvin is a Everton fan, writer, writes for the SB Nation blog Royal Blue Mercy. I'm not English enough to understand what that means, but Calvin, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Calvin, we sort of roped you into this because the three of us obviously were focused mostly on MLS. Do watch plenty of international soccer. Can't say I've watched much Everton this year. And I think, like a lot of people, were wondering what to expect out of Wayne Rooney. I guess first, maybe just give your general impressions on Rooney's performance this past year. Maybe a recap for us.
Yeah, sure. So on the point about not having watched much Everton football, well, Everton haven't played well enough to be watched this year. It's been terrible. So you haven't missed too much with not watching Everton, but. So Rooney, all right? So Rooney coming back to Everton at the beginning of this season, right? That's one of your feel-good stories, right? Local boy, made it good, England's best ever striker, Manchester United's best ever striker, and I think every Everton fan always wanted him to come back and, at least give us a couple of good years. And that didn't work out, right? I mean, Rooney is good. I think he started pretty well, but the team itself had some issues. We've had a bit of a transition between managers. We've had 3 managers this season, so there's been a lot of turmoil around the club, and Rooney has struggled with that. Again, he's the leading scorer on the team. He's got 11 goals on the season, 10 in the Premier League. But here's been the problem with Rooney, right? What position could he play or should he play in any league, right? Whether it's at DC United or at Everton. I think Everton started with him up playing sort of just behind the striker. They used him as a number 10. They've tried him as a number 8. They've even used him right in front of the defense at number 6. And the biggest problem with Rooney is that his legs are gone, all right? He's 32, but he's been playing at the top flight since he was 16. So his legs are gone, all right? So he's good for about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes of full tilt action, and even then you catch him very often, with his hands on his knees, gasping for breath. So that's a struggle again. So his vision is great, all right? He's got a great footballing mind. If you could plant him somewhere where he didn't have to run around too much, he's great. He could do wonderful things. But on a football pitch, and especially in the modern game where, it's all total football and everyone's got to do everything on the pitch, there's just no role for him.
So, as someone who has followed his career, I'm wondering how you think he compares now to maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Maybe not at his complete prime, but what is DC United going to be getting a player? I'm not going to say worth what they're paying him because some of that money is about off-field stuff. But I mean, where does he compare to where he's been over the last couple of years?
I'm sorry to say this, but he's a pale shadow, right? So, as his career has progressed, right, I think he's moved further and further, behind, coming closer and closer to the middle of the pitch, and in that role, right? So here's the thing. So I'm a big Juventus fan too. So I watched Pirlo in his last few years at Juventus and the role he played there, and then I watched Pirlo come to the MLS and struggle mightily. And what was the problem? Pirlo, again, was used to playing with time, right? At Juventus, he was shielded. He had all the time in the world to pick his pass, look at the opponents, find gaps, and do that stuff, right? And he wasn't able to do that in the MLS. The game, I think, moves pretty fast. Maybe people in England don't appreciate that about the MLS, but the game's quick. And I don't think Rooney's going to get that time to pick a pass.
Calvin, were you paid by Major League Soccer to give that glowing? I want to know who influences that decision.
So here's what ends up happening. So a lot of the crew on Royal Blue Mersey, right? We're U.S. based, and we end up getting quite a bit of flack for that from the very English Premier League fans who go like, "Oh, MLS soccer," and I don't know what they're thinking of. Are they still thinking of the Cosmos with Pelé or something? But the game has grown in the U.S.
For sure. Calvin, I wanted to ask one final question. As someone who's watched plenty of Wayne Rooney this season, if you were Ben Olsen and you get Wayne Rooney, what would be your ideal role for him? Like what position? And then do you play him for like 60 minutes and sub him off? Do you use him as like a late? I mean, he's not going to be a late game sub, but I mean, what's the ideal way to get the most out of him at this stage of his career?
So the one thing Rooney still has, right? He has a tremendous shot, right? So I would try to use him in a position where he utilizes that shot or his ability to ghost into the box, as the saying goes, because he's very good at that. He tends to anticipate the ball really well. So if there's going to be a deep cross coming in, he magically pops up at the end of it. Or if the goalie parries a shot and then the first guy on the rebound is usually Rooney, usually early on in the game. So maybe not as an out-and-out striker, because I think he's lost some of his physicality, but maybe if you're playing a 4-4-2 or maybe a 4-4-1-1 kind of thing, just so where he's playing off a striker who can absorb a lot of the center half attention, and then he can pounce on rebounds and second balls. I think that would be a good role for him. Definitely first 60 minutes of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, Calvin, we definitely appreciate you calling in, man. Like I said, it's been Everton. I'm not going to say has been unwatchable this year, but they haven't been on the tip top of our list, I think, of international games to watch. So we appreciate the insight, man.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, take care. Calvin May, Royal Blue Mersey writer, SB Nation blog for Everton. What do we think of what Calvin said? It seemed a little harsh, but I'm not going to.
Well, it seemed honest in the sense that
20 to 30 minutes.
He does.
Jesus.
He. I mean, does acknowledge that there are some things that Rooney still does exceptionally well, and he scored an incredible goal from what I remember from like midfield this year. He had a hat trick. So I think he's still, like Calvin said, he's got that ability to strike a ball, to finish. 11 goals this year for a very mediocre Everton team is not something to put aside lightly. So there are some positive attributes, but clearly this is a 32-year-old that has more tread on the tires than the average 32-year-old.
Couple of comments from our sort of chat room on our YouTube stream. Robert Cordova apparently was watching or listening to BBC 5 Live for a reaction to the Rooney thing, and the news presenter said they, quote, hope to have Rooney in time for the start of the MLS season in July. And then follows up saying, what do you think the reaction scenes of Rooney arriving at the DC airport will look like? I'm pretty sure TMZ will be there.
Right.
Let's see. Jesse Leifert, how many goals does Darren Maddox get if he starts for Everton for a full season? Another question. Would you take Fernando Torres for 3 years or Rooney for 1.5?
Rooney.
Really?
I would take Rooney.
I go with Nino on that one.
How old is Torres now?
Torres, I think, is 34.
I would take Rooney.
For 1.5 years?
Yeah. I feel like Torres doesn't have the name value, and I feel like
I agree with you on that,
yeah,
for sure.
And Torres,
Torres, whether unfairly or fairly, has just been shit on for years.
Right.
So mostly due to his time at Chelsea, but
Yeah, and he just also completely lost it for the Spain national team. He just fell off a cliff at one point. Rooney's position. I've seen this brought up. Is there really a debate? He's going to be...
It has to be forward.
He's going to be the lone striker in front of Acosta. And
that's how you limit the amount he has to run, period.
Yeah.
He's just going to camp out up top.
And, they have Assad and Areola on the flanks. They have Acosta. You have that trio of attacking midfielders and Rooney in front of them. That seems like, a unit that could be effective in MLS, and I don't really see any of those guys, being bench players. Even in this scenario, I'm already moving Zoltan Stieber, who's one of the highest paid players on the team, to a bench role. So
what about Rooney as a 10? I think he could.
Then where's Acosta go?
Yeah, that's a question. Maybe move him out to the wings.
Where do Assad and Areola go?
Well, listen, Ben will play anybody anywhere. Okay, so there's no,
I just think Rooney.
Get rid of Yamil Assad center back.
I think as a 10, you could limit the amount that he runs, even compared to a number 9 position, because he wouldn't have to play as much defense on the opposing team's defenders, and I think that you also, as Calvin mentioned, his physicality might be gone, so maybe that back-to-goal play might not be quite what it was. So you mitigate that as well by moving him to a 10 role.
We haven't heard from Rooney, too, but another big unknown here is where's his head at? What's his mentality coming into this league? You would like to think we're past the point where players would think of MLS as a place where they can go and chill, and as Gerard said, was have a beach holiday or whatever.
Cole.
Yeah.
it was Cole. Right.
A year before he moved to a
that.
team by the beach.
Yeah.
But then he actually was effective. And
Yeah.
It's
Gerard was the one
who
yeah.
treated the league like he was just
right.
kinda there
You'd think Rooney
play it
has enough friends or former teammates who could clue him into the league, and he should know what to expect. But I hope he comes ready to work. I hate saying that, but as Calvin just said, say what you will about MLS, you really can't question the physicality. And you also, nobody's going to be awestruck by Wayne Rooney. People are going to get stuck in on him. They're going to body him. They're going to, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and the reaction to Rooney's move, I think some of the more negative reaction has focused in on his age and the perception of MLS as a place where players go when they're past their prime. But, I think that this has been happening long enough for us to know that there is no archetype in this scenario. There are players around Rooney's age or older that have come here and become some of the best players in MLS history.
Look at David Villa, a long shot to make
Thierry
the World Cup
Henry,
team for Spain.
Ian Schweinsteiger was similar. And then there are also players.
Danielson. I'm just gonna
and then there are also players who have come around this age who have been terrible and have looked like washed-up older players, like we mentioned, Gerrard and Pirlo. So I think it's down to each individual, and there's no reason to try to categorize this as like having a greater meaning for the league as a whole. I mean, this is just one team who has found this player that they think is the person who's going to help move the needle a little bit in a market where they really need some juice.
One of our listeners, Holding Crib, asks how long it's going to be until Zlatan fights one of his teammates over all these quote shit passes.
I think he might fight Ziggy at some point too.
Do you think?
I think Zlatan would win that one.
You think Ziggy's job is in danger right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible to say that about what a fourth place team, whatever it is, but
I think so for two reasons. Just the circumstances. Siggy, when they hired him, was almost like a stopgap.
Yeah.
That was kind of done in the moment, trying to salvage
what Bruce Arena
season.
was to the national team.
Right.
Ziggy Schmidt was to the Galaxy.
I feel like, he wasn't a guy they hired with the long term in mind, so they wouldn't hesitate to dismiss him if he isn't getting the results. And on the other side, not to be like overly conspiracy theorist here, but like Caleb Porter has a relationship with Chris Klein that goes way back. Caleb Porter is available, looking for the next challenge. I feel like the Galaxy would be exactly the type of market he'd be looking to get into to, have a fresh start and do something a bit different and have a higher profile position they had in Portland.
So what you're saying is Wenger in to the Galaxy.
Carlo Ancelotti, guys.
Here's a question.
I've said this before.
If Ruud Gullit was David Beckham's handpicked coach to replace, who was it?
That was Stamson.
Who is Zlatan's handpicked coach to replace Siggy Schmidt?
Is Mourinho going to be available soon?
Maybe just like James Corden or somebody. Did you see him last night on the Late Late Show?
I didn't. I did see. You see Will Ferrell and the LAFC players on Corden and
no.
Okay, they had Corden on. He was spinning in a circle on the wheel, and they were trying to peg him with soccer balls. And they put a bullseye on his crotch. Oh. Will Ferrell nails it first shot. It was incredibly impressive. And then I think it was Tyler Miller came on first shot, drilled him right in the face.
Oh,
he was wearing a helmet.
I'm gonna have to pull that up.
It was good aim.
I've always wanted to see James Corden get drilled in the face with a soccer ball. So
by Tyler Miller.
Yeah, really anybody. Guys, do we have anything else tonight? I mean, it's sort of like focused in here on Rooney. Is there?
I'll return to what I was saying before we got the call. This is just a curiosity of mine. Is like when these big name players come from Europe, and in certain cases the deal gets done quickly, how much do they really know what they're getting into? Do they realize that media is able to come in the locker rooms after games? Do they realize that they have to fly coach? God, does this enter their thought process? Does Wayne Rooney realize if he comes this year he'll get lucky because they'll be playing almost all home games, but does he realize next year he's going to have to fly coach across the country multiple times?
He'll be in first class, though.
Am I wrong in remembering that like Beckham still flew first class?
He did. That's what I'm saying. He'll be in first class.
But then
and not just Beckham. I mean, like Keane.
But then
sometimes.
David Villa happily rides coach. He'll take like
he's
Instagrams.
Perfect. I mean, it's like he's like riding coach while like tweeting out the handles of his like lesser known on the league minimum players, being like, everybody follow my friend. He's the future of soccer. Blah blah blah.
Tommy
McNamara. Exactly. Yeah. They can't all be guajes,
Yeah.
But yeah, you do wonder that, and I like to that point, I think a lot of players hear that but don't necessarily realize how shitty that's going to be.
Who was it? I forget who it was, but it was this year. It was Gregory Vanderweel. First game with TFC, he goes after the game. He's in the locker room, and media comes in, and he goes, "Wait, media comes into the locker room here?"
Yeah, how do these things not get communicated? I remember TFC too. Jermaine Defoe, after like
he was not nice.
After 2 or 3 games, they tried to pull him aside for reporters to speak to him after a match or a training session, and he like yelled at the PR guy like, "Do I have to talk after every game?" And they're like,
"Yes."
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially someone like Rooney, he's gonna have to be kind of the ambassador of DC United.
Right.
So he presumably will be having to do more media than his teammates, or he should, because that's what they're going to be paying.
If he's not on this podcast, then he's a failure as an ambassador for that club.
I mean, I throw down the challenge to DC United. First Rooney interview.
Come to us.
Come to us.
I'd be like, Wayne, are you washed
the
up?
The 17th of May,
and he's going to be
2011. I'll put you asleep within 10 seconds, you little girl. Don't say stuff and not follow up on it. I'll be waiting.
I'm right here, Wayne. I'm right here.
What was that in response to?
Here's the best part. It was like a fan who was talking shit to him, and he replied to the fan, but he actually didn't he tweeted at himself. So it's just, the whole tweet is just at Wayne Rooney, blah, blah, blah. Then there's another tweet where it's just him asking Rio Ferdinand if he wants, quote, like, it's like at Rio Ferdinand, "Do you want picking up in the morning, mate? Like, do you want to ride to training?" You know, his Twitter account is honestly a work of art. It's just
mate.
Yeah.
You gotta do some more of those.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we're done with that.
I didn't realize the computer had a British voice.
All kinds, dude. There's a British voice. There's like a German accent. There's like,
oh my god.
Yeah,
can we read Jurgen Klinsmann's tweets in that accent?
God. All right, now we're done, right?
Okay.
Thomas, no, didn't we promise Thomas we'd do his entertainment corner this show? Or
Thomas'
thing?
Yeah. Thomas, what's new in the world of entertainment? What are you working on for Express this week?
In tomorrow's paper, I put together a nice spread where our critic did a review of the Melissa McCarthy film Life of the Party. It was not good, apparently.
I haven't heard of that one.
Does the critic go in on it? Is Express is known for? Do you watch Tim Heidecker's On Cinema?
Or
OCX,
not.
it's called now.
I think I may have come across that.
You have to watch it. It's incredible. It's like a parody movie review show. Anyways, this has gone on for too long.
All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. Thanks to Brian Strauss. Thanks to Calvin May.
Yep.
Thanks to Wayne Rooney.
Talk to you guys later.